TommyKay News! HOI4 is dead. The future of the stream is the news. Let's go. I have to copy Hassan a bit. He always like puts what he's talking about in the title. September news review. Let's start. The news without the bullshit of September 2025. Great guy, man. Great YouTube channel. There is Hamas in the basement. We have to do it like that, right?
September saw the Supreme Court of Brazil sentence former President Jair Bolsonaro to more than 27 years in prison for plotting a military coup.
Wow, they had enough proof for that? I remember back then when he was president, we would always talk about him a bit, what a piece of was. I never knew that much about him, but I remember reading a big article in a German newspaper that talked about how he used Corona to kill black people. Bolsonaro is withdrawing Corona help and not sending Corona help into like black neighborhoods and the favelas, and he would always traffic it into more white neighborhoods and stuff. Nice to see that piece like this still going to prison, man. Netanyahu has a big case that should really be dealt with soon in the next years. Netanyahu is also very close to prison.
Which saw Jair Bolsonaro narrowly lose to two-time President Lula da Silva. Bolsonaro and his allies would go on to spread false allegations of electoral fraud, which would ultimately culminate in the 2022 January 8 Brasilia incident. In a scene that would closely mirror America's own January 6th incident a year before, supporters of Bolsonaro would forcibly enter the Supreme Federal Court and the National Congress Palace in an attempt to overturn. Although 80 people were injured,
76,
over 2,000 were detained. There were fortunately no fatalities from the incident. Bolsonaro himself wasn't even in the country during the raid, as only a few days before, he was photographed eating chicken in a Florida KFC. Fast forward to February 2024, and Bolsonaro was ordered to hand over his passport after being declared a flight risk. Later that month, he would be seen spending 2 nights inside Brasilia's Hungarian embassy. Investigators suspected that he had been planning to
Hungarians, man, what are we doing here, huh?
A year later, in February 2025, Bolsonaro and 33 others were formally charged with plotting to assassinate Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes, as well.
Dude, that's the level this reaches. Plotting assassinations of high-level judges, man.
During the announcement, Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes stated, quote, "He tried to annihilate the essential pillars of the democratic rule of law state."
Sounds like something that could maybe be one day said about Donald Trump, man.
The greatest consequence of which...
Funnily enough, in a country seemingly much less developed than Brazil in this moment, the Supreme Court judge that would make this quote is most likely going to be actually applied by Donald Trump.
Been the return of...
Still, since day one, whether it's Trump or Biden or whatever, the one thing that never went into my head is the ultimate flaw of American society. How can it be that a biased president, whether he's left or right, Democratic or Republican, can choose Supreme Court judges? That is the most ridiculous thing ever.
Considering this was the guy Bolsonaro plotted to have killed, that's a pretty tame response. Although many within Brazil celebrated the sentencing as a huge win for democratic systems. Pro-Bolsonaro protesters were quick to condemn the court's decision. Some have been particularly critical of Brazil's judiciary, stating that it's been particularly harsh in prosecuting those involved in the January 8th incident.
Another great comparison to Brazil and America, where you will think America is much more civilized. In Brazil, they prosecuted some of these raiders. America, everyone pardoned. Even the 100 people that pled guilty, that were involved in the beatings and killing of police officers, pardoned. All pardoned.
President Trump, who had previously called Bolsonaro's trial a witch hunt, had this to say shortly after the sentence was handed down.
Well, I watched that trial. I know him pretty well. Foreign leader. I thought he was a good president of Brazil. And it's very surprising that that could happen. That's very much like they tried to do with me, but they didn't get away with it at all. But I can only...
Yeah, because you pardon yourself the moment you're president.
Say this.
Moraes is the kind of guy who puts democracy over freedom of expression. And although he operates entirely within Brazilian law, he really doesn't fuck around when it comes to upholding democratic institutions.
I like this guy.
We'll leave the question
like
of whether the next Brazilian election is scheduled for a year from now, so we'll likely be looping back to this story in the not-too-distant future. And a left domestic school shooting industry is now worth $4 billion. About a year has passed since we covered France's snap election fiasco back in July of 2024, and it seems as though the country is still stun-locked by routine government collapses. On September 9th,
Sounds very
French
French,
Prime Minister François Bayrou formally resigned after lawmakers...
Which country has the best-looking Senate room? The UK?
At the beginning of September...
They have like these really old wooden benches, man. I don't know.
France's deficit was that of 198
like Germany is very modern,
billion euros, which was roughly 6% of their national gross domestic product. The European Union demanded that number be cut down
Now this makes sense that people are interested in continuing school shootings in the US.
to below 3%, meaning that 40 billion needed to be saved. Prime Minister Bayrou's plan to do so involved freezing welfare within France, slashing away at civil service jobs.
We see this all around the world now. America, Germany, they're now attacking welfare. They're attacking the social state. They want to cut pensions. They want to cut aid stuff, which I think if you look at the numbers of budgets, etc., yes, social spending is enormous. It is enormous, but it can't be the solution to just cut the money that goes to the weakest parts of society, pensioners, people that don't have much, etc. It is clear to me that it's very easy to get money otherwise in other directions, but in these directions are like the friends and the friends of the politicians and stuff like that. It's the easiest way for a politician to get money back, to make the budget better, is to attack social spending. In Germany, there is now a narrative that old people, pensioners, should keep working, right? That's the thing. Every German chat will tell you that. That's in the fucking biggest newspaper, Bild Zeitung. They're thinking of, it's not gonna happen, bro, no way. That pensioners, if you're a pensioner, you should do 1 year for Germany. 1 year where you help Germany out a bit with your work and stuff like that. Imagine that. You worked 45 years, 49 years maybe, right? Then you get 43% of your last paycheck as the basic rent, and then you get all your other stuff, like private stuff, right? And then they tell you, we need even more from you.
It is an understatement to say that no one liked that. Parliament's vote was 364 to 194 against the plan. Back in August of 2024, we reported on Emmanuel Macron's snap election. And that story resulted in Macron's centrist bloc losing power and France's parliament being split into 3 rival blocs known as the far left, the centrists, and the far right, none of which commands a majority within parliament still to this day. France's parliament has been unable to vote properly, effectively achieving nothing within the past year. In addition to that, President Macron has repeatedly invoked Article 49.3 to push legislation without a vote, completely superseding the ungovernable parliament he worked to create. The perfect storm of events has led to France becoming a government only capable of collapse. With this in mind, France is still
Sounds very French though.
meaning that instability within the country has no doubt affected their allied nations. In order for France to maintain its own steady existence going into the
Send it to
future,
me, Dave.
the government must pull together and provide a solution. Though what that would be like
At the time of this, 5th of October, they still don't have a functioning government, I think, right?
as of the time
And
of
we'll think it's still
writing,
going.
French citizens have been revolting in the
Still going.
streets and are probably still revolting in the streets, like the French so commonly do when anything of note happens in the country. The movement known as Block Everything has gained major traction ever since September 9th, with protesters blocking major junctions.
Bro, I'm becoming very communist lately, man. I shouldn't say communist, but like pro-worker. The people should just fucking do a great restart. I believe in that shit now.
The next stop on our protest world tour is Indonesia, which saw a wave of demonstrations from late
Indonesia?
August
I
spill
didn't
out
even
into
hear
the
about
first
this.
week of September. The protests
Look, it's
You don't
Pixel.
have their trial of
This is
time?
Discord Pixel
In
right here. That's what he
Tokyo,
looks
we
like.
have that
started following a proposed change to housing allowances, which would give members of parliament an extra 50 million rupiah, around $3,000 US.
They give themselves each of them. Look, that's
Midlife
hundreds of people.
crisis is starting, but I still
3,000.
obey
The proposal highlighted the extreme level of income inequality within Indonesia, at a time when most citizens have been facing wage stagnation and a rising cost of
I literally just said that. In times where most of the people struggle hard, you give yourself a raise. I just talked about this in Germany. Happened earlier this year in Germany.
Despite Jakarta having one of the
There
highest
should be at least 100,000 people in the streets being like, how dare you increase your money, German parliament, as we all struggle? How dare you? But no one is out there. No one fucking cares, man.
Minimum wages in the country.
You see me angry? If you look at the world right now and you're not a bit angry, man, you might just be already a fucking zombie head, man. You might already be too full fucking gone.
$1,000 housing allowances represent a figure 10 times this number. And this isn't considering their regular salaries, which are significantly higher. Although protests initially started at a university in Jakarta, demonstrations quickly spread much further, attracting both students and labor unions. Protesters' demands included ending outsourcing, raising minimum wages, halting mass.
Literally the same thing happened in Germany. It was 600 euros here, not $3,000, but no one cared. No one gave a shit.
The movement was subsequently supercharged on the 28th of August, when an armored vehicle used by law enforcement struck and killed 21-year-old motorcycle taxi driver Afan Kurniwan. While most protesters were pretty peaceful, this was a spontaneous movement born out of anger in the fourth most populous country on Earth. Inevitably, it started getting violent.
I don't want to sound Hassan-esque, but can you blame them? Your country's falling apart. Apparently, your average salary is $250 a month, and each and every one of them has 3K more now?
Quite an interesting trend this month was that the Straw Hat Pirates...
That happens more and more now. I read an article on this. The Straw Hat Pirate flag is now in Nepal, Indonesia. Why? It makes sense, because Monkey D. Luffy is against the world government. He's like, freedom, fuck the world government, fuck the Marines, right? And now we live in a simulation where Monkey D. Luffy is becoming the biggest revolutionary figure of our time, bro. I should put his flag up here, dude. It is kind of fucking cool.
Of protest. The protagonists in the anime often fight for the liberation of oppressed people. And due to its popularity worldwide, it's also been adopted by protesters in France and Nepal.
I kind of subscribe to that, man. That's kind of cool. They're already mass producing them.
Flag has invoked a series of very different responses. These ranged from viewing the flag as a democratic right of public expression to others who want to outright ban the flag, viewing it as a symbol of treason.
Wow.
At time of writing, the protests resulted in at least 10 fatalities, thousands of arrests, and an estimated $53 million in damage to public infrastructure. This equates to just over 2.5 years of the housing allowance payments. From a purely monetary perspective, the nation's 2 weeks of unrest was still cheaper than actually paying the fucking bonuses. Both the UK and Australia have had some pretty sizable...
Isn't that the fascist Australia flag? I was playing fascist Australia 3 days ago, and that was my flag.
Anti-immigration rallies, so we're throwing them together. To start with south of the equator, the August 31st March for Australia protests saw an estimated 54,000 people attend a series of rallies across 7 states and territories. Nice. The specific views of the protesters tended to vary greatly depending on who was interviewed. Some in attendance simply wanted legal migration quotas to be capped at a lower rate, while others were overt members of white nationalist groups. This was actually one of...
That's always the problem if you join a group or protest like that. You don't know who's walking next to you. You could be just like a normal person who's like, hey, I want to Bisland immigration, but next to you is straight up fucking Adolf Hitler, man. And you have to always be careful, I feel like in human history, that when there's a revolutionary spirit, there's always forces that want to undergrow it.
This is exactly what happened in Adelaide, when neo-Nazi attendees took control of a public mic for their own speech near the end of the rally.
Imagine that, you're just like a mom and a dad, and you just want to show your opinion, and all of a sudden it's like, Australia will be 1,000 years.
In this instance,
Bob,
the organizer
what did we join here?
The rally in Melbourne appeared to have a much more overt extremist element, with white supremacist leader Thomas Sewell taking up a prominent speaking position. Meanwhile, the Sydney protest was reportedly organised by pseudonymous nationalist figure Beck Freedom.
I mean, as long as that is your nationalist figure, I think you're gonna be fine.
In her own words,
yeah, if that's the face of far-right nationalism, then I think we're still fine.
Quote, this is how I tried to explain it to somebody. I say, okay, so protect Australian heritage, culture, way of life. Next step, protect European culture, heritage, way of life. The next step is to protect white heritage. It all means the same thing. It probably didn't help that the related March for Australia website advocated for remigration, which is a policy which calls for the mass expulsion of immigrants and their descendants. The remigration section has since been removed, but no one actually knows who made the website in the first place. Extremist groups are able to use anti-immigration rhetoric to tap into legitimate concerns around housing and cost of living. This is where things get complicated, because cost of living in Australia genuinely is really really fucking high. A recent report by Demographia found that out of the top 15 least affordable housing markets, Australia made up 5 of them. Just for
And again, I'm tired of it. I will have my opinions on the stream. If you don't like it, leave. Is that the immigrants' fault? Is that the big evil fucking immigrants? Or is it the fucking owners? How can we increase rent? I need more gains here.
On the immigration side, it's fair to say that Australia's immigration figures are also pretty damn high. Recent figures indicate that around 31.5% of Australia's population was born overseas, which is around...
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. We have to talk about that, though, not just to be xenophobic, man. A big question of immigration is always, I'm not the biggest fan of immigration. You can't just open the floodgates, let everyone in. 100%. Everyone thinks like that, right? But you have to also ask how much, a very important question is, how many people does the country need? And is the native Australians doing enough children? Probably not.
However, immigration is only a very small piece of the cost of living puzzle. Zoning laws, a labor shortage, and very favorable tax incentives for property investors
Oh man, the big bad immigrants,
contribute much more to the increase in housing prices. Another important consideration is that Australia's high rate of migration is very much self-serving. Without migration, Australia's low birth rates would...
That's the point I always want to talk about. Facts, facts, facts. It's totally fine if you're against immigrants. I really think it's your free right of speech. If you're a German, you're like, oh, I don't like all these Muslims walking around. You can say that. You can say that. If you have an issue with how we handle it and how they come in, you can say that. My point is always, I just had this discussion at the Fight Club the other day. You have to see the truth of life, though. You can't just vote AFD and be like, if all the immigrants are good, everything is fine. Look at the facts. Look at the service sector in Germany, in hospitals, nurses, retirement homes, right? The greatest argument against xenophobia is you take Australia, you take Germany, and let's actually for 1 second fictionally delete all the big bad immigrants. You walk around the neighborhood, man, no one brings the packages, man. A lot of lower level jobs are suddenly gone. All the hospitals will fall apart. The entire nursery sector, and especially the pension, retirement home sector, falls utterly apart. That it has to be controlled, and it shouldn't be lawless, and that if a bunch of Syrians are building fucking clans in Berlin, no one likes this, 100%. But my point is always in this debate against the racists in my family and stuff is let's play on the ball field of reason and logic. You can have issues with this, but you also see the pros and cons. If someone breaks a law proven by court, then we need as a society come together and make sure the government has the funds to get them out back to Afghanistan or something. But walking around, the fucking immigrants, they're destroying everything. It's just fucking illogical. It is not the truth. What the stats show us, as he's saying right here.
According to Brendan Ryan, the chief economist at KPMG, even if Australia stopped all immigration immediately, it would only decrease the cost of housing by 2.3% over the next decade. That's not saying it would decrease by that much, just that it would increase 2.3% less. Considering housing prices...
The housing prices and rent prices are a huge issue on planet Earth right now, right? People don't talk about it enough. Living prices, man, are a fucking massive
have
issue.
Increased around 70% over the past 10 years, it would be hard to attribute this to immigration figures. A genuine debate around immigration does exist here, but unfortunately that tends to get warped by opportunistic extremists. Compared to Australia, the UK's own Unite the Kingdom rally on the 13th of September was significantly larger, attracting an estimated 150,000 people to central London. Unlike the Australian protests, the organisers seemed more relaxed about the use of foreign imagery, as along with the Union Jack and St. George Cross, attendees also carried everything from the Israeli flag to President Trump's own MAGA hats. The rally itself was organised by anti-Islamic activist Tommy Robinson, a co-founder of the English Defence League. Putting Robinson's history aside, the rally he organised clearly resonated with a large portion of the UK population. The rally also attracted a relatively modest counter-protest of around 5,000 people, who argued that the views of Tommy Robinson don't represent the majority of the UK. If we look at voting habits, we can see that the current Labour government managed to score a very convincing victory against the Conservative Party last year. With this in mind, current polling currently puts the populist Reform UK as the nation's most popular party, meaning if an Although Reform UK has run on an anti-immigration platform, the party has distanced itself from Tommy Robinson.
There's a big quote I read once, it's gonna get much worse before it gets better, huh?
likely owing to his criminal history. The well-organized Unite the Kingdom rally is a stark contrast to the more spontaneous anti-immigration rallies which have taken place across the UK over the past year. Others have included the wave of unrest following the Southport stabbing last year, as well as the anti-immigration protests in Northern Ireland in June this year. In terms of the concerns of the Unite the Kingdom protesters, these proved to be really fucking difficult to research. When it comes to crime, the UK doesn't seem to publish statistics related to immigrant status.
That's not good.
Migrants can have an effect on rental costs, with a 1% population increase contributing to a 1% rise in rent. However, this is an issue that tends to disproportionately affect certain areas, and relies on housing supply to keep up with demand. In terms of the cultural impact of migrants, this is the...
I like how he does this, and then he talks about, we tried to look up facts to tell you. Very, very beautiful.
Type of eye of the beholder shit we really can't quantify. Rapid cultural changes tend to scare the fuck out of people. But as research demonstrates, assimilation to a nation's culture is inevitable.
But again, I want to make something clear. When I do these politics streams, often people think I'm this crazy left-wing. I fully support this. These 150k people should be fully allowed to do this, 100%. That's freedom of speech. The question is when it becomes really fucked up, when you're like, you know, we gotta kill all the brown people. That's obviously not okay anymore, right?
However, large surges can stretch the public infrastructure.
Very well said. Immigration long-term helps, but if it's a heavy income at once, it's very destabilizing.
Further than desired.
I would have probably
Despite
fully
many
agree with
painting
that.
the Unite the Kingdom protesters as...
But then again, who fucked it up? Our governments, right? To not do it well, to not do it cleanly. And I always say this, man, the downfall of democracy will not come from our enemies. It will come from the incompetence of our democratic representatives. The people that are supposed to defend democracy, look at America too, Mr. Schumer, are the most incompetent people for, especially in these times where the right wing is getting so strong. They are the worst representatives of freedom, liberty, and democracy.
According to an Ipsos poll in August this year, nearly half of all British adults have immigration as the #1 most important issue facing the country.
And I would argue, I mean, they can have that, it's subjective. But I would think if you look at the literal facts, there are certain issues that are much, much more heavier weighting in their lives, like housing and stuff like that. But then again, you have to, even I, as a technocrat, like in Look at Studies, have to accept this. If the people feel like this is the biggest issue, then you have to talk about it. I'm not going to blame them for that, right? They can have these emotions.
Early this month, the small Himalayan nation of Nepal was suddenly thrust into the spotlight following large-scale protests, dubbed the Gen Z protests because of the large portion of young adults participating. The demonstrations led to the collapse of the Nepalese government and the appointment of...
It looks like the beginning of a zombie movie. That's a straight-up zombie movie, bro.
...of Nepal's first female prime minister, elected via Discord call. But first, some background. A significant fraction of Nepal's economy comes in the form of remittances from Nepalese abroad sending money back to family at home.
Wow. 25%. Remittance.
A lack of opportunity in Nepal pushes many young people abroad to find work.
It's like Poland.
And those who stay tend to join online economy work. On the 4th of September, the government of Nepal announced that 26 social media...
Can anyone Google what the remittance income of Poland is? Must be like 8%, 10%. That's what I'm guessing.
...platforms would be blocked in the country after failing to register with the nation's government. The blocked platforms included Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Notably not blocked was TikTok, who had registered with the government and appointed a local liaison. The blocking of the social media apps severely limited the possibility of finding work for young people within Nepal. Officially, these blocks were to ensure that the platforms could be properly moderated locally within the country, but critics claimed that they were intended to shut down criticism of the government.
0.85, 0.9, 0.9 only. Damn, Poland is strong as fuck, man. Polish people, this is your moment. Only 1% of GDP is remittance. Damn.
One such criticism was the Nepo kid trend, which highlighted the privileges and advantages given to the families of influential politicians. The combination of the average Nepali citizen earning under $1,400 per year and seeing the lavish lifestyles of those related to political...
Once again, it has a little bit to do with rich versus poor. And no one is gonna doubt that in the next decades, you and me will see a lot of tension between rich and poor, as in Nepal here.
Figures led to significant anger among the young pop.
I even would like to see, I'm gonna say my opinion, I even would like to see this more in Europe and North America. The start of a culture where we start to have a culture of, whoa, the rich are the enemy. But I don't see it at all. I feel like our kids, our young people, they want to be part of the rich. They want to have Rolexes. They want to have the best makeup. They want to have the Instagram followers. I don't see it at all in Europe and in North America. You wish compared to us, should we get you? You guys always think I'm rich, bro. Dude, you think I'm anything compared to a millionaire and billionaire? Fucking nothing compared to that, bro. Nothing.
Gatherings occurred in the Nepalese capital of
I could stream 1,000 years. I wouldn't even be close to these people.
Kathmandu, and were initially described as peaceful. However, according to one of the organizers of the
subs,
protest,
guys. Come on.
the
No
scene
one's rich
turned
here.
violent after a rock was thrown at a CCTV camera. The police at the scene responded by firing live ammunition into the crowd. People didn't just want to crack down on corruption, they wanted the whole government to resign. To evade the social media block, protesters extensively utilized VPNs and posted flyers with QR codes for organizing.
VPN,
While there were a number of leadership figures that emerged, there was no clear leadership structure, and the movement was highly decentralized. Curfews were later established in an attempt to quell the unrest. Protests resumed the following day, even larger than before, and Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli ordered his ministers not to resign their posts. He would then heroically resign his post, flee to an army barracks via helicopter, before being moved to an undisclosed location. Other ministers weren't so fortunate. The man on screen being stripped naked and paraded through a river isn't some petty thief. It's the fucking finance minister who was taken from his home after it was set on fire. Other high-ranking officials were seen dangling from a rope while being evacuated via helicopter. Protesters seized on their momentum and stormed several governmental buildings in Kathmandu, setting fire to the parliament, Supreme Court, a number of administration buildings, as well as the residences of the president and prime minister. Several prisons were also attacked by protesters, with at least 2 seeing a 100% breakout rate. In another instance, 5 juvenile inmates were killed while trying to escape a correctional facility in Banke. In the evening of the 10th, the Nepalese army announced that they would take charge of the country in an effort to quell the unrest and violence. The army also requested that the Gen Z protesters
They don't look. I don't want to be an asshole, but they don't look like soldiers, man. Fuck. They're like 50 kilograms.
to discuss the future of the nation. From the evening of that day to early the next morning, the army arrested 27 individuals for arson, looting, and various other no-goodery. The protesters did their best to distance themselves from these individuals, and did not push against the army restoring control over key regions. Separately, over 150,000 protesters met in a large Discord call to debate who they believed should lead the country in the interim. After a few hours of debate and discussion, the protesters decided on former Chief Justice Shushlia Karki as their nomination. On the 10th and the 11th, meetings between the president, army generals, and the representatives of Gen Z were
shout out to the army for letting this go through. Normally you will have a general that builds a military junta, but it looks like they accepted this.
conducted to settle on an interim
Shout out to
leader.
the
On the
Nepalese
12th,
army, bro.
Karki
Thank
was
you, Joker.
confirmed by the army and Gen Z as the interim prime minister, with full elections scheduled for the 5th of March 2026. After the dust settled, 72 people, including 60 protesters, 9 prisoners, and 3 police officers were killed, while another 2,100 had been injured. Karki officially took office on the 14th of September, pledging to rebuild and get government services back up and running as soon as possible. Finally, she would note that she didn't want to be there, but took the job because that's what
That is the greatest politicians on earth. Our leaders should be people that don't want to do it. That is the greatest fucking idea for democracy. You don't want the career politician narcissist. You want the guy who's like, I don't want to do it, man, but I guess I will do it for stability. That's what you fucking
people
need,
wanted.
man.
She then promised not to remain in power for longer than 6 months.
You need Jon
News of
Snow.
the protests. Viewers who have been paying attention might have noticed that the United States has basically turned into a GTA Chaos server. On the 5th of September, the New York Times published details of a 2019 operation against North Korea. The covert mission involving Navy SEALs had planned to plant a secret listening device within North Korea's borders, which would allow US intelligence to intercept communications from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The mission went to shit after one of the mini-subs were discovered offshore. The SEALs would then open fire on the boat, killing all 3 people on board. After boarding,
Good job, Navy SEALs. You failed the mission, then you killed a Coast Guard,
it was
man.
found that the 3 people who had just been killed were merely local fishermen, and when The news of the failed operation came just 3 days after another maritime operation this month, which saw the US Navy blow up a narcotics vessel en route from Venezuela to the Caribbean. Speaking at a press conference,
I think that most Americans cheer for that.
the American president would state that the 11 people on board the vessel were members of the trendy Aragua cartel and were carrying drugs bound for the United States. Once again, the legality of the operation has also been brought into question.
This is something that scares me personally a bit, where we see that even in democracy, especially Donald Trump, what Donald Trump is doing is he is slowly dissolving the fabric of law and order. I will do it anyway. What are you gonna do? You're gonna do nothing. Where like checks and balances are slowly getting destroyed. Some people love that. People love that shit, and that's scary, man. When checks and balances are gone, that's
However,
a
the
bit
US
scary,
has
man.
cleverly, and Professor Michael Becker of Trinity College Dublin states that the label stretches the meaning of the term beyond its breaking point, explaining it better than we could. Quote, the fact that US officials describe the individuals killed by the US strike as narco-terrorists does not transform them into lawful military targets. The US is not engaged in an armed conflict with Venezuela or the trendy Aragua criminal organization. Labeling everyone a terrorist does not make them a lawful target and enables states to...
That looks straight up like Berlin. I swear to you, if you go to Berlin, you're gonna see this picture.
However, nerd legal scholars didn't faze US Vice President J.D. Vance, who posted on Twitter, killing cartel members who poison our fellow citizens is the highest and best use of our military. When another user pointed out that this could have been considered a war crime, Vance would then respond, I don't give a shit.
And this is the playbook of Steve Bannon. If you investigate Steve Bannon a bit, who kind of created MAGA in a way, right? This is what it is. To slowly dissolve the fabric. To slowly be like, what are you gonna do about it? It literally says in Stephen Bannon's book, it's this theory of throwing shit. You throw a lot of shit at the public. The Gulf of Mexico, I want Panama, I want Iceland, I want it all. And you see what sticks. You just overwhelm the people so much. What is going on that they can't handle anymore? The throwing shit agenda
Vice President
of the
has a
MAGA
point.
movement.
The country had another certified America moment when a political commentator was shot dead in front of 3,000 people. 5% of the country
Already kind of gone, right? This whole Charlie Kirk thing is kind of forgotten already.
proceeded to
It's
treat the
already kinda
victim
over.
like they were Nelson Mandela, another 5% seemed to celebrate it like it was the return of the Jedi, and the remaining 90% were too apathetic to give a shit. The nation would then hold its breath over the next few days to find out whether the killer's ideological motives aligned with their opposing political faction. A late-night show host would later say some mild but unfounded shit that would get him suspended after political pressure, then later
Mild.
reinstated after viewer backlash. The whole thing would spark a wide debate around free speech and government overreach. The rest of the world once again looked on in disbelief.
That is insanity. I can't believe that's real. He just got shot, and 10 seconds later, this guy starts dancing.
The next stop in our American lightning round was President Trump's visit to the United Kingdom, his second official state visit as president. The trip was intended to razzle, dazzle, and flatter the president, with the itinerary less concerned with talks and deal-making, and much more focused on pomp and pageantry. This is likely why the visit was mainly spearheaded by the royal family, who gave the president the largest military ceremonial welcome for a state visit in living memory. Considering Trump seems to decorate his own home like Buckingham Palace, rolling out the royals to butter him up is a pretty wise move. On his arrival, the royals called up 120 horses and 1,300 members of the British military to make their point, and even chauffeured the president in a decked-out carriage to Windsor Castle.
The Epstein files must be crazy. Yeah, right? I'm gonna be Joe Rogan conspiracy here. We all know Prince Andrew was involved. That's known now, right?
In any case, Mr. Trump's UK visit was highly choreographed, likely because according to recent polls, most citizens believe that the president's policies have had a negative impact on the UK. Just days before the visit, a campaign group unfurled a 400-meter photo of President...
That's fucking heroes, bro. I'm a believer. If you look at it now, there's clearly something going on with Epstein and Trump. There has been something going on. And now, if you think about it, there's a chance that it's not super low that Trump was involved with this pedophile, right? The things Trump said, his own little beauty passions for underage minor girls. And now this guy gets the most pompous fucking celebration, the Buckingham Palace. Imagine that is the world we live in. You're a supporter of the leading pedophile rings in the world. And you get treated like a king. in Buckingham Palace, man.
Only the next day, a different group would project the same picture
Fucking
on
heroes,
the side
man.
of
These
Windsor
fucking
Castle
guys.
before being arrested. The day after that, an ad van with the same picture was seized by police in Windsor, with a representative of the organizing group stating, quote, "We're ready to make sure Epstein haunts him everywhere he goes." A series of stunts came just days after the British ambassador to the US was fired following his own ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Whether the UK's red carpet goes.
This is the British ambassador to the US, and that's him years ago with Epstein. Bro, Alter, I don't know if I have a tinfoil hat, man, but this fucking shit is crazy. This whole Epstein shit is fucking crazy, bro.
Already carry out the largest immigration enforcement operation at a single location. On the 4th of September,
Oh, they raided a Japanese Hyundai plant. Hyundai is Japanese, right? 500 people.
a Hyundai manufacturing facility in
But now they can't build cars anymore.
Elabelle, Georgia was.
That's in Korea.
Although some were released shortly after, most were loaded onto buses and taken to the ICE facility in Folkestone, Georgia, more than 100 miles away. The raid itself was later described by some of the workers as a war zone, and there were even reports of workers hiding in air vents and a nearby sewerage pond. ICE claimed that many of the workers were residing in the US illegally or had overstayed their visa. However, the personal records and immigration documentation for those detained hasn't been made public. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung believed that the raid would make South Korean companies very hesitant to invest in the US, and would state, quote, "This could significantly impact future direct investment in the US." Meanwhile, South Korea's Labor Minister Kim Jong-un would comment, "The
It's all a simulation. It's all a simulation.
Kim Jong-un would comment, "The way it was done, it felt like not even prisoners of war would be treated like that." That was the shock that many of our people felt. It's no secret that the Trump administration has been going Super Saiyan 3 and
Jesus, man. Fuck. I mean, the people voted for this. They voted for this.
just
Damn.
this year, we've covered a wave of deportations to the Salvadorian super prison, 8 immigrants who were deported to South Sudan, and a whole protest movement in LA following a series of ICE raids. The latest move this month had President Trump put a $100,000 fee on H-1B visas. H-1B visas are intended for highly skilled foreign workers who can fill labor shortages in specialized fields, which usually fall within the tech sector. The use
Elon uses that a lot.
of H-1B visas have long been a divide.
Trump gold card is here. We're living a simulation. My dear friend, this is not anything about left or right anymore. This has nothing to do if you like TommyKay or not. Look at this picture. This planet is either utterly cooked, or you and me form an organization and we fucking rise up. That's the only 2 options left. What the fuck? What the fuck? This guy's trying everything to do to make a lot of money privately. For a processing fee, and after DHS vetting, a $1 million contribution, you receive US residency and record time with the Trump. Wait, I get a green card if I give him $1 million. This is this cannot be real. This is not real. Sign up and secure your place on the waiting list for Trump Platinum Card. For a processing fee, after of $5 million, you will have the ability to spend up to 270 days in the United States without being subject to US taxes on non-US income.
Our US section has already gone a bit longer than we'd like, but the UN General Assembly in New York is way too funny not to cover. President Trump showed up to the UN headquarters in New York, and almost immediately, you could tell that he'd run out of fucks to give. In a speech to the heads of state, kings, diplomats, and America's closest allies, he would state that the US is the, quote, "hottest country anywhere." The topic of renewable energy would make up around a quarter of his speech, as he would call climate change the greatest con job ever perpetuated on the world, and that the carbon footprint is a hoax made up by people with evil intentions. He would also celebrate his withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement before praising clean, beautiful coal. He would then move on to the topic of migrants, stating that Europe needed to end the failed experiment of open borders, before stating, "You have to end it now. I can tell you, I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell." He would then state that he had personally ended 7 wars, go on a digression about he should have gotten the contract.
It reaches level where you think it's a fucking joke. You gotta, as an upstanding, logical thinking human being, you have to slowly come to the conclusion that this is a simulation. It's a TV show. There is no God. We're all a TV show for aliens. Maybe God is just watching. And maybe God is just sitting there with that tray and he has mac and cheese and he's just laughing his ass off. Maybe that's the reason for it all. Why do we live? Why do I suffer? Because it's fucking funny.
To rebuild the UN headquarters, personally insult London's mayor, and make a comment about how his wife was in great shape. At another point, he would criticize NATO countries for buying Russian oil, stating that they were funding the war against themselves. To be fair, we've got to give him that one. The dude has a point. Other highlights of the speech included a claim that environmentalists wanted to kill all the cows, personally thanking the nation of El Salvador for its super prison, and stating that, quote, everyone says that I should get the Nobel Peace. We now cross over to the Middle East. On the 9th of September, the Israeli Defense Force would conduct an airstrike within Qatar's capital of Doha, attempting to kill...
If you're a comedian, Trump's election must have been the biggest gold mine ever for you.
...several senior Hamas figures within a residential complex. The attack marked the first time that Israel had conducted a strike within Qatar. Certainly wasn't a successful operation, as not only did the missiles not kill a single senior official, but they ended up killing several civilians, and a member of Qatar's army.
But no consequences, right? Are they like paying anything or something? In the speech he said sorry. Yeah, I had a discussion in the locker room in my gym, and the guy I discussed with was very pro-Israel. Israel is trying their best. They're creating zones for the Gazans, so they only attack targets that are staying in these zones and stuff. I mean, it was weird talking to this guy as he was naked. It was weird.
But among the targets was Khalil al-Hayya, the Hamas official in charge of the hostage negotiation team. Just 2 days before the strike, Hamas announced that it was ready to immediately start another round of negotiation.
Hamas states they're ready to negotiate, and they try to kill the main negotiator. Really shows that they want peace, huh? They really want to get the hostages back.
Following new ideas from the United States regarding a ceasefire agreement. The catalyst for the strike was supposedly the Ramat Junction shooting the previous day, which killed 6 and injured 21 on a bus to East Jerusalem. The strikes were carried out by a combination of 8 F-15s and 4 F-35s, which fired ballistic missiles into space to avoid violating Saudi Arabia's airspace. As to whether
Scheiße, dude, what the fuck?
The US knew about the operation, yes, but also no. Reportedly, Israel only tipped off the Americans mere minutes before launching the missiles. Although the missiles didn't kill any of the intended targets, one of the fatalities was Khalil al-Hayya's son. In a pro-gamer move, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu traded a day of potentially successful peace talks for airstriking the son of the lead negotiator. For what it's worth, all 15 members of the UN Security Council condemned the strike, including the United States. However, in a weird, keeping the pace kind of way, they left any specific reference to Israel outside the statement. Not long after,
no one cares anymore. There's no more justice anymore. Nothing matters anymore.
After the UN General Assembly voted to support a two-state solution to the
you can get away with everything now
conflict,
if you're in the right group of
142
people.
nations in favor, 10 against, and 12 choosing to abstain. The 10 votes against are a very strange alliance of countries, to say the least, which include the United States, Israel, Argentina, Hungary, Micronesia, Nauru, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Paraguay, and Tonga. There's probably some deep lore in why half of this list is...
I'm finishing my service in 5 months. I can tell you for sure that the army in our country have no interest in harming civilians. Hamas really uses the Gazans as human shields. I lost people in this war. No one denies that. No one denies that you're a good human being, man. But there is obviously proof that IDF has killed civilians. There's proof of that. Israel has killed civilians. That is a fact of life. I'm not trying to take your humanity away. I'm not saying you're a bad human being. I'm not saying all Israelis are fucking evil. But you also cannot deny that these things happen. Provenly, we just had one thing here. A week ago, we had that rocket killing like these children at the waterhole. There's so much fucking shit there. Never will say you're an evil guy. Never. If you actually think that in the entire IDF in Israel, everyone is just innocent, that's ridiculous.
The endorsement included some of the harshest criticism of Hamas ever issued by the United Nations, stating that we condemn the attacks perpetuated on 7 October by Hamas against civilians, and Hamas must must release all hostages. It also states, quote, "In the context of ending the war in Gaza, Hamas must end its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority." Both Israel and the United States were very vocally against the resolution. An Israeli UN ambassador would comment, quote, "This one-sided declaration will not be remembered as a step toward peace, only as another hollow gesture that weakens this assembly's credibility." Most recently, the UK, France, Canada, and Australia all formally recognized the state of Palestine at a UN conference in New York this month.
You're right, we had our moments, but there's also happened on October 7th, all the attacks they do to us every day in the country. But war is war. At the end of the day, everyone wants peace. I disagree with that. Everyone wants peace. I will refer you to the other stream from last week where we deeply looked at Netanyahu, a human being that provenly doesn't really look for much peace. All the facts are in that stream if you want to look at it. We had our moments, okay, where the UN is now officially, in many sources now officially talk of a genocide in Gaza. What happened on October 7th was terrible. 100%. No one is denying that. But at some point in an intellectual debate, you have to come to a conclusion that all sides have their evil, and acting like all of Palestine is evil and Israel is the great hero is just not logical. There's facts and facts and facts. Once again, we now looked even at the paper of the UN talking about the genocide that is just fucking proven now at this point. Thank you, Straube. At this point, you can't just walk around acting like, oh my god, we're the grand heroes here, man. Every single person we killed in Palestine was obviously Hamas, man.
On the domestic front, Ukraine's commander-in-chief Alexander Syrskyi told reporters that Russia's spring and summer campaign has effectively been disrupted. This is what happened on the 9th of September. Estimated 23 drones crossed over to Poland's eastern border. The nations of Germany, Italy, Belgium, and the Netherlands were quick to assist in a response, which led to 4 of the drones being shot out of the sky. By the 12th of September, the wrecks of 17 Russian drones had been identified. It's believed that the goal of the operation was to probe NATO's response to a violation of its airspace, as none of the drones were armed, and some were even made of polystyrene.
This is a false flag. Even Russia said this is not Ukrainian drones.
The incursion has marked the first time since Russia's invasion that a NATO country has shot down Russian assets.
I think they even monitored the start coming out of Russia
in its airspace. Poland's foreign minister Radoslaw Sikorski would go on to reject a suggestion by US President Donald Trump that the drone wave was a mistake. This was almost immediately reinforced by a
Trump said that? It must have been a mistake.
Second drone incursion into Romania 3 days later, and 3 Russian fighter jets that flew into Estonia's air.
Straight up shoot them down, straight up, bam, and get them out of the fucking air, man.
Poland has already announced that it will be receiving training from Ukraine's anti-drone teams, with Radoslaw Sikorski commenting, quote, "The Ukrainians have better equipment for dealing with Russian drones, and they have much deeper and more up-to-date experience of resisting the Russian army." This growing list of incidents is likely what led the EU to push forward with its plan to build a €140 billion drone wall, which will shore up its eastern border with Russia, as the EU looks to construct a deal to give Ukraine a gargantuan €140 billion interest-free loan, paid for by the interest generated by frozen Russian assets.
Nice.
The EU really said, we're going to build a drone wall, and
Great
Russia's
fucking
going to pay
news.
for it. EU leaders plan to land on an agreement by the end of October. You might also
Great videos, man. That guy makes amazing videos. Well cut and stuff.